All right, folks, here at the center bench, we have Gabe Feenan, currently working on a nice glob of hot glass there at the end of his blow rod. You see he reaches behind him from time to time, using some of that water to cool off the bubble in very specific locations. Set up the outside so it's got some structural integrity before we go back into and grab some additional hot glass. Looks like we're getting ready for a gold leaf pickup here in our booth. Keep an eye on our center bench here and talk through that foil pickup as soon as it happens. So here on the left-hand side of the studio, Gabe has taken that bubble he was previously working on, thrown it inside that crucible, add another layer of clear hot glass to the outside. And as he comes back to the center bench, we'll track his progress. Notice him plucking up some imperfections in the surface of that glass. We're going to get those shears and trim that away. And then from the bench, Gabe moves over to the pipe cooler, just a big water bath to cool off that blowpipe that we're working with. In doing so, we're able to get our hand a little bit closer to the material we're working on. Makes it easier to carry that big, hot, heavy bit of glass around the studio. Makes it a little bit easier to work on. And then we'll get back into that rewarming chamber. That rewarming chamber runs on natural gas and forced air. It operates at 2,300 degrees for the entire time that we're here in the studio. You contrast that with the crucible that is just to the right of our artists there. That is a big bowl that holds 1,000 pounds of liquid glass at 2,100 degrees, 24/7. So that runs constantly. Gabe has now brought that form back to the bench and reached behind him, is using a wooden tool called the block. That block is made of fruit wood, a dense grained fruit wood, either apple or cherry most often. And the reason that we soak those tools in water is so that when the glass gets close to the water, it creates a layer of steam on which that glass rides. Doesn't allow the material to actually touch that block, and provides us with that super smooth finish that we're used to seeing from our glass products. Now that pad that Gabe just put down, that is in fact a pad of newspapers, and it is soaked in water, and it provides us the same type of dynamic that we get with our other wooden tools, in that the steam allows that glass to ride on it. All right, into our bay for that foil pickup, rolling very gently back and forth across some gold foil in that box. Making, Gabe?
We're making like a rice bowl. Basically.
A bowl? Okay.
Into a bracelet, I think.
Okay.
Gonna get sandblasted.
Got it. So Preston is taking that bubble form back into the rewarming chamber. Again, 2,300 degrees, get a little more heat imparted to it. Make it a little more malleable. We can shape it up exactly how we want to. You notice he's been rolling it back and forth across that big metal table. That metal table has a special name. It's called the marver. In Italian, it means marble. Historically, they were a big stone marble table that they were rolling back and forth, but we found that this stainless steel helps us immensely as well. Let's take a look at what we've got going on over here in our left bench. Looks like we're working on some fin forms here with Nick and Martin. Mr. Martin Janecký out of the Czech Republic, part of the NCN Collective. And using that hot torch, focus some of that heat energy right in some specific portions of that fin form. You compare that with the torch being used here at the center bench. We call this our fluffy torch for obvious reasons. In the center bench, we've got Gabe here with our balloon, our bubble form in the rewarming chamber. On the left-hand side, we're putting some more details into these fin forms. Now here at the center bench, we're working on putting what's called a jack line. It's a constriction off the end of the blowpipe that will serve as the location from where we will break this form away from the blowpipe. And then back to the papers, adding a little bit more volume to that bubble, cooling off the surface just enough. And refining that jack line just a little bit more. Did some time here at the bench and then back into the rewarming chamber. Get some more heat back into that bubble form. Here on the left-hand side, we've got Nick doing a similar thing. Collecting up a little bit more heat in that rewarming station. And you see Martin here with that hot torch. Again, that hot torch runs at about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit when it's full, running open. Applying some very direct and targeted heat into our fin form. Allows us to get some of those sculptural design elements in there that the artist is after. A little bit of cold air there on that jack line, kind of set things up, keep that bubble from moving a lot. One of the things that you learn as a fledgling glass artist is that connection point between the pipe and your glass form is one of the most important things to pay attention to while you're working. That location is called the moil, and that moil has to stay above 1,000 degrees or it will crack and we'll lose all of our progress. So you'll see the artist from time to time either go back into the rewarming chamber to keep the moil above, or in a lot of cases, you'll see them use the big fluffy torch to bring that temperature back up. And now using the weight of gravity to kind of collapse that bubble a little bit, give it a little more squat appearance. And then back to refining that jack line. All right, you notice Preston here at the center bench has picked up those cork paddles. It's a good indicator that we're going to take that bubble and kind of squash it down. Not exactly sure what we're going for, but it's you can kind of expect that to happen. Applying a little pressure and then a 180-degree flip to keep everything on center. They're squashing it. Yep. So instead of a perfectly round spherical form, just going to give it a little bit of a and back into that rewarming chamber, again 2,300 degrees. Can we get a diagram of the rewarming chamber up on the screen? Thank you very much. As you can see, a nice big open area inside, no glass. Again, it runs on forced air and natural gas. And this is only on when we're here working in the studio. Conversely, behind Kristen, we have our crucible, if we could get a diagram of that put up. The crucible differs in that it holds our glass in a large crucible, in a large bowl. 1,000 pounds of glass in each one of our two crucibles, running at 2,100 degrees, 24/7. Thank you. All right, Preston's back on the bench. He's again picked up that fluffy torch, paying close attention to the moil, that connection point between our glass form and our blowpipe. He's got to keep it above 1,000 degrees or it will crack and we will lose all of the hard work. So from time to time, as you see here, I'll blast that moil with a fluffy torch. On the far right-hand side of the studio, you can see there that Sarah has sat down in the right-hand bench. She's working on a sculptural punty. Basically, she's creating the glass connection that will attach to the bottom of our form here in the center bench. Once we tap that away and leave it on Sarah's pipe, we'll begin to work on the mouth or the open portion of the bowl. We got to get it to that point. Sarah's running over to the pipe cooler again to bathe that stainless steel rod in a bath of water. Makes it a little cooler and a little easier for us to carry our glass forms around the hot shop. But having these two pieces close to the same temperature is critical. Hot glass will only stick to hot glass. So we got to make sure that they are nice and hot and tacky for each other. We'll see this connection happen here at the center bench. Once Sarah's done in that rewarming chamber, she'll bring the punty over and present it to Preston, who will then find center, attach it to the bottom, and then using a little bit of water from the buckets behind him, you'll see him take those drops of water, put it on that jack line, that constriction point that we were talking about, and then with a tap of the tool, those surface cracks will completely transect the object, leaving it on Sarah's pipe. We'll see that happen in real time here. Here we are finding center, ensuring that the connection is nice and strong. A bracelet. All right, so we've now completed that punty transfer. The stainless steel rod on which that bubble sits now is solid. It does not have a hole through the middle, so we won't be inflating it from the pipe end anymore. And with Preston happy with where the progress is, Sarah takes it back into the rewarming chamber for another overall heat. Here on the left-hand side of the studio, again, Nick and Martin Janecký working very diligently on this wing or flipper form. So for those of you on the right-hand side of the studio that can actually see into this rewarming chamber, and we remember the process that we just completed, the portion of the glass form that is now inside or furthest away from the glass artist was the coldest part of the glass. We did that punty transfer, basically flipped it around. And so now we have to heat up that cold portion. We're spending a little extra time in that rewarming chamber using that, that blast furnace focus for that heat right at the very end of that object. And once Preston is ready for that, bring it back to the bench and then open that form up a little bit more. Using some duck-billed shears to trim away the excess around the mouth of that bowl form. You'll leave that there on the ground. And then back into the rewarming chamber to melt that crunchy end that we just cut away, give a little more heat to our object, make it more malleable and workable. You notice now that Preston is using a different type of tool, similar to our jacks. These ones are called parchofis. They differ from the jacks in that the parchofi blades are made out of wood that's soaked in water, whereas the jacks have metal blades. Those parchofis allow us to open up this balloon form a little bit easier, a little more gently. And because we're not using cold metal tools, it doesn't leave any surface chill marks or imperfections. Here in the left bench, again, we see Martin pick up that hot torch, 5,000 degrees when it's running open. And Nick has put that form back into the rewarming chamber, 2,300 degrees. And then back to the bench for some more sculptural work. Here at the center, you notice Preston has picked up those cork paddles again and is refining the outside shape of that form, giving it a little squish. Make it a little more oblong and less spherical. And really teasing out the opening of that bowl form. Again with those cork paddles and the parchofis to refine the shape of that bowl. And then here in our foil booth, we've got Charlie laying down another layer of gold foil for another run a little bit later this afternoon. Back into that 2,300 degree warming chamber. Check in here with our left bench. Again, still working very diligently on that, that fin form. Adding all of those sculptural elements to bring the realism. And for those of you who are curious, it is Martin Janecký here in our left-hand bench, and Preston Singletary here at the center. Both of which are from the NCN Collective that have been awarded the residency program for the next 2 weeks. So we're very excited to have all of these amazing glass artists here in the museum hot shop with us. So you're working very, very diligently with that paddle to really refine the opening of that, that bowl form. And then another quick dip back into that rewarming chamber. Yes. 8 pounds right now. And then the gravity hangs it off the end, right? All right, so here at the center bench, we're nearing completion of this bowl form. You can see here that Gabe has put on the face shield and is getting the gloves ready, while Preston pays a little extra attention to that moil, that connection point at the end of the blowpipe. Here shortly, when we get ready to knock this piece away and Gabe is getting ready to put it into the annealer for the evening, you'll notice that Preston will reach behind him into those buckets of water, grab a few drops of that water and apply it to the constriction point off the end of that blowpipe. And then with a tool, he'll take a quick little bang on the blowpipe, which will separate our object from that moil, from that sculptural puntee, and leave it in Gabe's hands. Once Gabe is done, he's going to run it over to our annealing oven. Our annealer sits at about 1,000 degrees. When we go home for the evening, we hit run on the brain box, brings it down to room temperature overnight. There's the water drops. A couple more here. And then with a quick tap, bangs it away. Absolutely. Good round of applause for our Hot Shop team. Off to the left-hand side of the Hot Shop studio, where we'll put that away for the evening. Again, that's our annealing oven. The annealers sit at about 1,000 degrees throughout the day, and then in the evening when we pack up to go home, we hit run on the computer program, and it brings that 1,000 degrees down to room temperature over the course of a number of hours. In this particular case, the objects are fairly simple, and we would most likely be able to see those tomorrow morning when they come out. And with that one done, our Hot Shop team is going to take a quick little break, get a little bit of water, and then come back and start another one of those bowl forms. All right, so here at the center bench, sit. Take a pause. All right, here at the center bench, we've started our next form. Sarah is currently standing in front of that reheating chamber with a color bar attached to the end of her punty. And getting that, that color up to temperature so we can start working it, putting a bubble in the end of it. And over here on our left bench, Martin is continuing to work diligently on that fin form. Using that hot torch, again, runs at about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit when it's full open. You contrast that with the brighter torch that is sitting behind him. We call that the fluffy torch. Not nearly as hot, but it keeps our objects above 1,000 degrees. And then back here in our center bench, Sarah has gone to that marver, shaped up that color bar at the end of our rod here, and then back into the rewarming station to get that color up to a good working temperature. Doing a regular color overlay on this bubble?
Yeah, we'll do an overlay and then roll up the gold leaf.
The foil, yeah, okay. All right, so one of the questions that we get asked very often is how do we apply color to our glass objects? Here to my left, we have Gabe working on the small marvering table, moving that glob of glass back and forth, shaping it up. He's going to add a little bit of air into that, a little puff and cap technique to start our bubble. While he's doing that, Sarah, here in the center rewarming station, is heating up that color bar. That color bar is just a single color of glass. When they get their respective pieces up to the right temperature and in the right shapes, Sarah will present that colored glass to Gabe, who will then attach it to the end of the bubble, cut away Sarah's pipe, and then they'll roll that color around the outside of the bubble. We'll watch that happen here over the next few minutes. All right, so the question is, what if we want to add different colors to our objects? Can we add a certain color to our crucibles? How do we actually do that? In smaller glass studios, when they're working on very specialized things, then they will do, entire color pots of that particular color. In our instance, we're using color bar. We're going to get it nice and hot and overlay it over the outside of the bubble and encase the bubble in it. You will also see cane roll-ups where we'll take long stringers of glass and we'll roll it on the outside of a bubble. On the far left of the studio, you see that vented black hood over there. That's our powder hood, where we can add crushed powdered glass to the outside of an object, give it an ombre or a fade to it. Lots of different ways to apply glass. But like I said, in this particular case, we're doing what's called a color overlay. Question was, is the texture always sandblasted? No. In this particular case, it's the artist's vision that they're having that sandblasting done to the outside of it. Gives it that matte finish, less polished. Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely does.
All right, so as we were talking, Sarah and Ben here at the center bench did that color overlay. Gabe presented the bubble, and Sarah brought the color. And Gabe then snipped it away from Sarah's pipe and rolled it down and around the bubble form on which he was working. And then back into that rewarming chamber, melt that glass in, get a good solid join between the color and the clear bubble underneath. We're going to come back to our center bench, form it up a little bit more, and let that bubble set just a bit before we go back into our crucible and get another gather of hot, clear glass over the outside of it. Before we do that, we're going to work it, shape it up a bit more here on the marvering table. Let's check in here with our left bench, see what's going on. Nick Davis, one of our resident hot shop artists, working with that hot torch, pulling out some of these sculptural elements of that wing form. You see Gabe working on a little puff and cap, added a puff of air, and then capped the end of it. That cold air, as it hits the hot glass, does exactly what you think it would do. It expands, and by capping the end, he's able to inflate that bubble form without actually having to blow into it. Here at the center bench, Gabe is using that metal tool called the jacks, really set the outside shape of that bubble. I'm going to let it set up here, get a little more structural rigidity to it. That's a good indicator that here in a moment we're going to go back into that crucible to add another layer of hot glass. And the reason that we're letting it set up here at the table, or at the bench rather, is to protect that bubble from imploding under the heat and the pressure of all of that new glass that's going to be added to it. So we got to let it set, get a little crunchy, a little harder, and then we'll add another layer of glass. All right, so Gabe is back here at the center bench after having gone into that left side crucible, added a layer of clear glass to the outside of it, and is now using that wooden tool called the block to shape up the outside. Some people wonder why we use wooden tools. You know, wood and hot glass don't necessarily mix. Seems counterintuitive, but the wood does something special for us in that it absorbs the moisture from the water in the buckets behind the artist. And when that moisture gets close to the hot glass, it turns to steam, creates a layer of steam in that tool on which the glass rides, leaving an absolutely perfect surface with no marks in the bubble itself. Now, if you can contrast that with some of the things that are happening here on our left-hand bench, you can see that the glass isn't nearly as polished, isn't nearly as smooth, and that's because they're using those metal tools and it creates an uneven chill mark in the surface. So back into that rewarming chamber, again, 2,300 degrees. Give a little bit more heat into our bubble form, and we'll bring it back to the table, or back to the bench rather, and continue to shape it up. More sculptural work on that fin form here on our left bench. While Martin's working on that, we're going to be back here with Gabe, again shaping up that bubble with the tool called the block. And then using the force of gravity to kind of collapse that bubble and make it a little more squat, a little easier to work with. Center bench, they're really letting that bubble set up nice and solid. Good indicator that we're going to go back into that crucible and add another layer of glass to the outside of it. All right, so here on the right-hand side, we can see that Gabe has run off to the pipe cooler with that big glob of hot orange glass. Running through that pipe cooler really does a couple of things for us. Makes that pipe nice and cold so we can get our hand a little closer to the object. Makes turning it at the bench a little easier. And it makes it a lot easier for us to carry that heavy, 8 to 10 pound object around the hot shop studio. We'll let that bubble set up just a little bit here. And back into the crucible for another gather of hot glass. Here on the left-hand side, again, those crucibles hold 1,000 pounds of glass at 2,100 degrees. They operate 24/7. Notice that artist is twisting that pipe in there, wrapping the glass on it. It's kind of like liquidy honey, if you think of it in terms of its viscosity. And then back over to that pipe cooler to cool things off. Make it a little easier, again, like I said, to carry it around the hot shop studio and work it in the bench. Let's check in here with our left-hand bench, see what's going on. Martin and Nick still working on those sculptural elements of that wing form. And then back here at our center bench, we've got that big bubble. Gabe's gonna sit down, use that big wooden tool called the block to shape it up. And when Gabe here at our center bench is happy with where that bubble is, we'll actually get it back into this little booth here that has our gold leaf laid out. It's going to take a little bit of rolling, a little shaping before we get to that point, though. You see here in the center bench, Gabe has now picked up that pad and is cooling the outside of the bubble with it. That pad is exactly what it looks like. It is a wad of folded up newspaper soaked in water. It allows us to very selectively shape and form and chill the outside of that bubble. Currently, Gabe is rolling back and forth across that big metal table called the marver, making sure that the form is the right shape as they get ready to do this gold foil pickup. Once more back into the rewarming chamber to make sure the surface of that form is up and ready to bond to that gold leaf. Here we are into the leaf booth, rolling up. You roll it back and forth on the marver to make sure that all that gold leaf is securely.
Full metal jacket.
Full metal jacket. Okay, I like that. And then back into the rewarming chamber to make sure that all of that glass has fused into the surface of our form. Additional pieces, and then they'll cold work them, put them in the garage, and then get them up to speed when they actually make the form of this. All right, folks, back here at our center bench, you see Preston is using that torch. We call it a fluffy torch. And he focused a lot of that energy, the heat energy from that fluffy torch, onto the connection point in between our glass form and the blowpipe on which we're working. That connection point is called the moil, and that moil is critically important in that if it drops below 1,000 degrees, we run the risk of cracking the moil, and if the moil cracks, then we lose all of the work off the end of that pipe. So from time to time, you'll see us go back to that rewarming chamber to get an all-over heat on the outside, but alternatively, the artist can take that fluffy torch and focus some of that heat energy down at the moil, keeping our objects safe. Now, Preston is currently working on putting in a jack line with that metal tool called the jacks. That jack line will serve as the break-off point when we get ready to move this bowl form from this blowpipe onto a solid rod called a punty. And then Preston's going to use that air gun to help set that moil up a little bit, make it more solid, give it a little more structural rigidity. And then we'll get back into that rewarming chamber for another all-over heat. Here on our left bench with Martin Janecký and Nick Davis from our Hot Shop studio team. Continuing to work the sculptural elements of that wing form. All right, you notice Gabe here holding that bubble aloft, that form. He's using the force of gravity to collapse the bubble, make it a little more squatty. And then back to the bench to refine that jack line a bit more. That will be put away and cut, grinded, and polished. And so it'll take sometimes 2 or 3 weeks for all of these pieces to come back together and make a single Sure they do. All right, so here at our center bench, Gabe has taken that large form, put it back into the rewarming chamber. If we could see a diagram of the rewarming chamber up on the screen, there we have it. You can see that on the inside we do not have any glass. It's just a big open chamber. Runs on natural gas and forced air. And it operates at 2,300 degrees for the time that we're here in the studio. You compare that to the crucible, which we have 2 here in the hot shop floor, if we could see a diagram of that. Those crucibles hold 1,000 pounds of glass at 2,100 degrees, 24/7, running constantly. There you go. 1,000 pounds of molten glass, 24/7, natural gas and forced air. All right, so here in the center bench, we've come out of that rewarming chamber after having focused so much of that heat energy at the very end of our form. Preston's currently working on setting the bottom portion of that bowl, getting it nice and flat. And then back into that rewarming chamber. You're going to see that theme a lot here. To the chamber, back to the bench, to the chamber, back to the bench. Preston's using that big fluffy torch to keep that moil hot. Remember, we have to keep it above 1,000 degrees, otherwise we risk having the moil crack and losing all of our hard work. And just to my left-hand side, Sarah is working on a sculptural punty. This punty is different than the rod on which we're currently working. This one is a solid rod, so we won't be blowing through it in order to inflate our object. We're going to be using this to attach to the bottom of our bowl. We're going to separate our bowl from the pipe that Gabe is currently holding. And we'll leave it with Sarah. And then we will refine the opening or the top portion of that bowl. It's very critical that we have these two pieces of glass close to the same temperature. That way they stick together. They stick together strongly. And so that's what we're doing right now, is making sure that the temperature here at the center bench and the temperature at that far right bench are close enough to attach them together. A little more attention with that big fluffy torch on the moil, and then back into the rewarming chamber. Portion that's going to open up. It's the top part. She's working on a piece that you're going to attach to the bottom, and then they're going to snap it away. All right. So as we get close to this punty transfer, we'll talk through what's going to happen. Preston's going to reach behind him with those tongs that he's got. He's going to use a little bit of water, and he's going to apply it to the constriction point, that jack line that we talked about earlier. That water will create some surface cracks, and with a tap of his instrument, those surface cracks will go all the way through the glass item that's there on the pipe, breaking it away nice and cleanly, leaving it in Sarah's capable hands. A little extra attention with that fluffy torch while we let that sculptural punty set up. And when Preston's happy with that, we'll get to the water. Here we are. Couple of drops. No pressure. All right, let's hear it. A round of applause for them. Absolutely. All right. So if you think about the way that this bowl is being constructed right now, the hottest part of the object is attached to the pipe, and the coldest part is furthest away from the artist. We have to focus the heat energy down towards the end of that, or towards the mouth rather, of the bowl, so then we can flare it and open it up into the bowl form that we're used to seeing. It's a little too cold to do that right now, so it's going to take a number of trips back and forth between the bench and that rewarming chamber. And again, you notice that Sarah has taken that form grabbing a little extra heat from our rewarming chamber. And then she's pulled that form out a little bit, focusing the heat energy right towards the very end. Back in for another all over heat. Got to keep the skin of that bubble as uniform as possible. And then back out to refocus that energy at the end of our bowl form. Glass Hot Shot team has been working together for 20 plus years. Charlie, the guy here in the foil booth, setting things up, he actually hired a number of the folks when it first opened. And so it's just the years of folks working together, knowing where they're going to go. They have meetings before, they can ask the artist what their vision is, where they want to go with it, so they have a good idea of what they're after when they come to sit down. Yeah, so in this particular case, the center bench was Preston Singletary with gray hair with the long ponytail. Yeah, yeah. And then you got Joe here. He is the one of the tribal elders. Mr. Parriott. He is, 7 or 8 of these guys are just absolutely phenomenal glass artists. And then this afternoon we should have Skyriver show up and one other. They'll look at the pictures that kids have drawn, and then based on all right, so back here at the center bench, we have completed that punty transfer, and now we're working on opening the mouth of that bowl form up. Sarah's currently got the punty rod, nice big deep heat into that rewarming chamber. And then Preston here at the center bench will be opening the mouth of that bowl up using a tool called the Parriott. Parriotts are kind of like our jack tool, except instead of metal blades, these ones have wooden blades, which again allow us to shape our glass forms without leaving behind tool marks in the surface of those forms themselves. All right, so back here at the center bench, really using those Parriotts to define the mouth of that bowl form. All right, picking up a little bit of extra heat from that rewarming chamber here at the center bench. On the right-hand side of the studio, we have one of our Hot Shop team members, Gabe, is currently putting on his protective gear. That's a good indicator that we're getting close to knocking this object away and putting it away in the annealing oven for the night. And as he gets ready to do that, you'll watch Preston reach behind him with his tongs, grab some drops of water, and add that water to the constriction point at the end of that moil. And then with a tap of his tool, he'll knock that piece into Gabe's hands, where we'll run it over here to the left-hand side of the studio and put it away in our annealer for the evening. We'll watch that happen now. So what we're going here, folks, is if you can see this bracelet that I'm holding, this is kind of the form that we're going for. You can see it laid out there. Eventually that piece will have some cold work done to it to make it more true to this shape here. All right, here comes the drops of water. Roll it in a little bit more, and then there will be a quick tap here. All right, let's have a round of applause for the team. Absolutely. Now that object is going to go into that big black box over there. That's called our annealer. That annealer sits at about 1,000 degrees internal temperature during the day. And then when we get ready to leave for the evening, we push the button on the brain box on the side, and over the course of 20 or so hours, it brings that temperature from 1,000 degrees down to room temperature so we can pull our objects out, start polishing, cutting, and getting ready for the next stage of assembly. All right, folks, it looks like we're going to take a quick break here. Let the hot shop team recock and get ready, and we'll start again shortly. All right, so here at the center bench, we're setting up to make another object. We've got Gabe currently working with the clear glass, rolling it back and forth on the marver. Pretty soon he's going to add a little puff of air and cap the end of it. We'll see that puffing cap produce a bubble in that hot glass. And then behind Gabe, we've got Sarah working here at the center rewarming chamber. She's got a color bar of red glass on the end of her rod. And she's going to shape that, get it up to the right temperature, and then she's going to present it here to Gabe at the center bench. And then he will snip that color bar away from Sarah's rod and lay it down over the bubble on which he's currently forming the outside. You see Sarah currently shaping up that red color bar, while Gabe sits here at the center bench letting that bubble set up, makes it nice and rigid so that when Sarah presents that hot, sticky red glass, it flows very nicely over that rigid bubble that Gabe is currently holding. Once that happens, you'll see Gabe move over to the marvering table and try to begin the process of smoothing that colored glass around the outside of the bubble. So here we go with the application. I'm going to shear it away pretty quick. Into the rewarming station to get more heat energy directed into our bubble form, into that color bar. And then we should see Gabe move over to the marvering table to roll that color around the outside of that bubble. Here we go, rolling that color down over the clear bubble. Using that marvering table, make sure that we've got a good connection. Back into the rewarming chamber for a little more heat, and then another roll on the table. Make sure that, that the glass has been fused together. See Gabe here at the center bench, rotating that bubble back and forth across the arms of the bench he's sitting in. Really letting that bubble set up, get some structural integrity before he adds another layer of hot glass on the outside of it. The reason we have to make sure that we've got some integrity to it is because that glass is hot and it has a lot of weight to it. And we want that bubble to withstand the pressure and the heat going back into that crucible. So we'll do that here at the bench when Gabe is happy with where that bubble is. We'll go back into that crucible, adding another layer. We'll call that a gather. And then he'll move back to the center bench and continue to shape up that bowl form. He's got all of that new hot glass on the end of his form. And you noticed as he came back to the center bench, he reached down and picked up that wooden tool called the block. That block is made out of either cherry or apple wood most often. And it does a wonderful thing by soaking it in the water, buckets behind us. The moisture in that block, the moisture in that block, when it comes in close contact with the hot glass, produces a layer of steam. That layer of steam provides a nice cushion for our glass form to ride on, allowing us to give that nice, super smooth finish to the outside of it without leaving behind any tool marks on the surface. And take a run over to the pipe cooler. I don't know if we've got a diagram of that we can show, but that pipe cooler is essentially just a water bath. Allows that stainless steel pipe to run in, cools it down, allows us to get our hands a little closer to the object on which we're working, and it makes carrying that 8 to 10 pound hunk of glass around the studio a lot easier to do. And so Gabe is going into that left side crucible, gather another hot layer of glass on the outside of the form he's working. We'll get that back to the center bench eventually, shape it up, and then roll it through our gold foil. We have a little bit of detailing to do before we get to that point. So again, back to the center bench. He's going to sit down, he's going to reach behind himself, grab that wooden tool called the block, and begin shaping the outside of that bubble form. He's identified a perfection in the surface of the glass, using those shears to cut it away. And now Gabe is running over to the pipe cooler. Run that stainless steel pipe through the cooler. Makes it a little easier for us to get our hands closer to the object on which we're working. Makes it easier to carry that 10-pound glass object around the hot shop floor. Makes it a heck of a lot easier. So now that he's cooled that pipe, going to get back into the bench, continue forming up after he takes a heat. Again, that rewarming chamber that Gabe is standing in front of runs on natural gas and forced air and operates at a temperature of about 2,300 degrees during the time that we're here in the studio. You contrast that with our crucibles, which we have two, one behind Kristen here on the right-hand side, and then another one on the left. Each one of those crucibles will hold 1,000 pounds of glass at 2,100 degrees, 24/7. We see Gabe using that tool called the block again. That wooden tool gives us a nice cushion of steam on which that glass form rides. Presents us with that beautiful shiny finish that we're used to seeing. And then alternatively, you can see that he's reached down and picked up that stack of material we call papers, because it is exactly that. It's newspapers folded into a stack and then soaked in water. And it allows us to selectively shape and cool the bubble in accordance with what the artist was going for. And then a quick roll back and forth across the marvering table to set the outside diameter of the form on which we're working. Back into the rewarming chamber, get a nice all-over heat, continue to refine that outside shape. In this case, we're letting that bubble set up a little bit more solid, making sure the moil doesn't move. And then we're going to take a quick run through this gold leaf that is inside the booth right there. Quick roll up on the outside. Add another layer of color and texture to our form. And with that gold leaf added, we'll get back into the rewarming chamber to make sure that everything fuses nice and tightly.
Smells like fried chicken. What's up?
See that Preston has taken over control of that form, adding a little more volume with a puff of air in the back side of that pipe. And then back over to the rewarming station, impart some more of that heat back into our object. Notice that Preston has picked up what we call the fluffy torch, paying a little bit of attention to the area closest to that blowpipe. Getting ready to create what is called the jack line, which is nothing more than a constriction off the end of that blowpipe that will be used as the location from where we separate this object and leave it on another punty, another rod. Before we make that happen, we got to get back into the rewarming station, make sure that everything is up to temperature so that it moves properly. Preston is now using that metal tool called the jacks to create that constriction. Again, it is called a jack line. And now to the papers to chill and form the outside of that bubble form, bring it more in line with what the artist has envisioned. Use a little bit of that cold air to set that moil, make sure it's not moving. And once Preston's happy with the progress, he'll hand that back over to Gabe and we'll get that back in for another heat. you know, it's kind of wider. So if you picture that bowl form sitting kind of like this, the flow pipe is attached here or even here, what they're going to do is it's basically just oversizing a bracelet. So they'll cut the top and bottom off of the bowl. Yeah, so it's, yeah, that's the artistry part, right? They're just making that bubble form. Okay, so here at the center bench, folks, you notice that Nick is using that fluffy torch, paying a close attention to the connection point between our rod and our glass form. The reason we do that is if that connection point, it's also called the moil, if that connection point drops below 1,000 degrees, it'll crack and separate and leave all of our hard work on the ground and a big frowny face on our artist's face. So we will, from time to time, use that big fluffy torch to keep that moil above that 1,000-degree point. Now here, just to my left, Sarah is making a punty rod. This punty rod will be worked into its final form and then attached to the bottom of this bubble form that we're working on here at the center bench. And by attaching that rod by attaching that form to Sarah's rod, we can then start working on the opening of that bowl form. And you'll notice when we get ready to do that, Preston will reach behind him with his tongs. He'll grab a few drops of water from those buckets, and then he will apply those water drops to that constriction point, the jack line that we talked about. And then with a tap of his tool, he will transect that connection point and leave that bowl form on Sarah's rod. It's called a punty transfer. And we'll watch that happen over the next minute or two. We got to make sure that the glass items are similar in temperature. That way they bond, stick to each other, and present a good connection, something that's safe that we can work with. So both of them are in that rewarming station. They'll come back to the center bench and they'll start doing that punty transfer. All right, gonna find center, make sure that both of the axes are spinning appropriately. Necking it down, making another constriction off the end of Sarah's rod. And they're gonna let Sarah's end set up a little bit longer while they pay some close attention to that moil in the bottom end of this bowl. And then when they're ready, like I said, Preston will reach behind him for that water and you'll see that punty transfer happen. All right. Good round of applause for that. That was pretty spectacular. Good job, folks. All right, and then back into that rewarming chamber. If you remember that the way we were constructing this bowl form, we just left it attached, or we just left the attachment point. It is now the furthest thing away from Sarah. It's also the coldest portion of that glass object, so we have to get that back into the rewarming chamber from time to time, bring everything up to a good working temperature so we can continue to shape up our form.
Something. We're gonna try trivia.
All right, after taking that nice long heat, back in the center bench, open up that form we're currently working on. Preston has switched from the jacks to a tool similar to the jacks called the Parriotts. These Parriotts, they have wooden blades instead of metal blades, and those wooden blades allow us to open up that object and manipulate it a little bit better without leaving behind any of those weird surface marks that you'll see with some of the metal tools. With that little bit of opening there, a little bit of teasing, Sarah's taken that form back into the rewarming chamber. Get a little bit more heat on the surface, and then we'll get it back to the bench and continue working. Back to the bench to continue refining that shape. You know that Preston has picked up that large pad. He's going to start working on the outside of the form with that. That pad is, well, kind of what it looks like, just folded up newspaper soaked in water. It allows us to move and shape the object in a much more focused way than using some of our other tools. And because we're using the water on that pad, it also allows us to keep that nice shiny surface without imparting any of those tool marks. And now with the cork pads, we're going to shape it up a little bit more, or flatten out those two sides. Back in. Continuing to work the mouth of that form with those wooden tools. A little gentle application with the Parriotts there. And then back to the G-hole for another heat. All right, back here at the center bench, that fluffy torch comes out, hits that moil. When that happens, at the same time you see Gabe starting to get his fancy dancing clothes on. That means we're getting ready to put our object away into the annealer for the evening. He's getting that protective gear on so that when he gets exposed to the 1,000-degree temperature that comes blasting out of our annealing ovens, he doesn't get his face cooked. And as they continue that process, we'll talk about what's going to happen next. When we get ready to break this piece away from that rod, Preston's going to reach behind him with his tongs, dip into that bucket of water behind him, and using an overhand technique, he's going to apply those water drops to the constriction point just off the end of that punty rod. Those water drops will create surface cracks in the glass, and then with a quick tap of his tool, the vibrations will then transect that little constriction point, that moil, and leave everything in Gabe's hands. Here comes the water. You got those surface cracks developing a little bit more. Here, watch for the tap, and then a big round of applause. All right, there we go. Absolutely, let's hear it. All right, that object is going to go into that big black box over there on the side of the studio. That's called our annealing oven. That annealer has an internal temperature of about 1,000 degrees. Keeps the glass hot, but it doesn't keep it malleable. When we leave, thanks for coming in, folks. When we leave for the evening, we'll hit the run button on the side of that brain box, and it'll bring that 1,000-degree temperature down to room temperature over the course of the evening. So we should be able to see these objects come out of the annealer tomorrow morning. Okay. All right, folks, we're going to try something new here, so please bear with us. That QR code that you see up on the screen, that is for a quick trivia game. If you look over here to my right-hand side, your left-hand side, we've got those 3 glass objects that we'll be competing for, testing our glass knowledge. So go ahead and log in with your QR code if you're interested. If not, no pressure. We'll make a last call when we get ready to go, and then using the automated system, we'll see who wins. Fastest out of 3. All right, folks, last call for those who want to join. Give it another 5 or 10 seconds, and then we'll begin. All right, folks, question number 1 of 3. Get ready. Bear with us. This is the first time we're doing this, so working out some of the bugs. All right, folks, apparently there's a 2-minute timer that we're working on right now, coming all the way through the countdown. Again, apologies, this is the first time we're doing this, so bear with us. Yeah, I know. All right, looks like we're moving. What year did the Museum of Glass open? (2002), folks. All right, let's get ready for question number 2. What temperature is the glass furnace kept at? I might have said that once or twice. (2,100 degrees, 24/7). All right, question number 3. What have we got? What is the nickname of the Narrows Bridge? All right. Hey, all right. Look at the 8 of you who live here. All right, Shane. Show of hands. Where's Shane? All right, Shane. Shane, if you'd like to come over here. (2002). I know. Okay, so we got 2 more rounds. 3 questions each round. Again, the first one to answer correctly gets the highest number of points.
We're doing the leaders.
Oh, the leaders.
Question 2.
Leaders of question 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Clear out the next one first.
Sorry, my apologies, folks.
That was it? Copy. So, wait, okay, so Steve, who's the next one? Magical Rhino. And Steve. Okay, Magical Rhino is the second one.
Okay, Magical Rhino. Sorry, Magical Rhino. Show your hands. Anybody? Any Magical Rhino? Were you the Magical Rhino? All right. A local U.S. Air Force veteran coming down? Okay. And then finally, Steve S. Who's Steve S? All right, Steve, you get number 3. All right, folks. For those of you that are left, we're going to be doing about an hour's worth of break here. We'll see you back after lunch.